All right, welcome to episode 5 of Education in Color. Today I am joined by the wonderful John Jay president, Karol Mason. Karol, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Good morning. It's so nice to be here for this conversation today. I'm only doing this for you because you're so special. I am, as you mentioned, the president of John Jay College and committed to our students, including one of our alumni who are sitting in here right now. So I'm just happy to be part of this conversation.
Thank you for that. And also, Karol's being very humble because she was also the Assistant Attorney General previous to her role here at John Jay John Jay College of Criminal Justice. As you can tell, I'm a little bit nervous with this episode, but you know what? We're just going to keep rolling. So we're just going to dive into the first question, which is, Can you tell us about your journey and what inspired you to become the president of John Jay?
So I'll start the journey from when I was at the Department of Justice to how I got to John Jay. I did not aspire to be a college president. My decision was that I wanted to be the president of John Jay because John Jay is special. So when I was at the Department of Justice during President Obama's first term, I was a deputy to the Associate Attorney General, who's the number 3, but I oversaw all the grant programs, and so I was always approving the travel for people in the grant programs. And this one particular person was always going to John Jay, and I was like, what is this John Jay? And so then I started learning more about John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and when I became the Assistant Attorney General at the Office of Justice Programs, we did all of the work with state and local governments and working on criminal justice issues, juvenile justice issues. I oversaw the National Institute of Justice and the Bureau of Justice Statistics. And one school kept coming up all the time in our work, and that was John Jay College of Criminal Justice. So I became focused on the good work that was happening there, thinking about how do we improve our criminal justice system. And then I knew about CUNY growing up because I grew up here in Amityville on Long Island, and I had family members who went to CUNY. And so understanding that John Jay was part of CUNY and the work that it was doing was just this beautiful marriage to me because CUNY, I love CUNY's mission of making sure that everybody has access to a quality education. And I will put our students up against anybody's any day of the week. So when I was... So let me back up. So the first term, I was the Deputy Associate Attorney General. I always get the order confused because there's also Deputy Associates. Anyway,
Right.
I was a Deputy Associate Attorney General. And on Fridays, I would go to the Senate Chaplain's Bible studies. And he told us one time, put something God-sized in your journal or devotional that nobody else can do for you but God. And so I put in there at that point in time that I wanted to become the Assistant Attorney General because of the work that was happening. That was the part of the department where you got to really influence policy and help state and local governments really shift how they did their work. And it happened. So then after I became the Assistant Attorney General, I was still going to the Senate Chaplain's Bible study on Fridays. And he said it again. He said, put something in there God-sized that only he can do. And I put in there that I wanted to be the president of John Jay College of Criminal Justice, but then put my head down, kept working. And then in October of 2016, the then president, Jeremy Travis, announced that he was stepping down at the end of the academic year. But my head was down, finishing my work, and so I didn't think about it. And so my policy advisor came in, he goes, did you hear about Jeremy? And I said, yes. And he said, that's your dream job. I said, yeah. I know, but we have work to do, so I can't think about it. And then after the election happened and we knew there was going to be a shift in our priorities around our work, my focus was putting my head down and securing the work that we'd been doing to advance these criminal justice issues. So the headhunter called me and I didn't talk to her until she called January 21st, and I said, I can talk to you now. And that was my pathway to John Jay. It was because of the work that happens here and our students. And as I mentioned, our students are absolutely remarkable. And I love being able to see them grow and have them challenge me, which they do. We say they're fierce advocates for justice, and that is not a tagline. That is actually true about our students, right? One is over in the corner. If you see me looking, that's what I was doing.
And thank you for that great answer. And the one thing that popped into my head was, dang, so you had like a headhunter just call you up for the position to become president at John Jay.
Correct.
Interesting.
But that's what they do. I wasn't the only one they called. They called lots of people.
And so, I just want to take a quick little sidetrack, but I guess the process to becoming president of John Jay, was it something that you took a lot of oh yes, I can't believe it, like I'm gonna do it, or was it more so like, all right, you know what, nonchalant, let me do this, but I'm still focused on the DOJ stuff?
So I didn't do any of it until the DOJ. I didn't pursue this until I was no longer employed.
Oh,
And so
got
when
you.
you work for the Department of Justice and when you're in the federal government, you can't look for a job while you're there.
Oh, okay.
And so that's why when they first reached out to me, I said I can't talk to you after January 20th. So between January 20th and January 20th, 2017 and August 1st, 2017, I was actually unemployed.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And then thinking about what my next step was going to be, because I retired as a practicing lawyer between President Obama's terms. I went back to my old law firm for 1 year and retired as a lawyer. So I had the freedom of thinking about what did I want to do next with my life.
Got it. I got it. Okay, so then in that case, moving on to the next question, since you mentioned law, what sparked your interest in pursuing a career in law and criminal justice? And were there any influential experiences or individuals that inspired you along the way?
So I didn't have a law career in criminal justice. And that's important, I think, for people to know and think about, that your career path isn't linear. When I grew up here in Amityville, just across the bridge on Long Island, and when I was growing up, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I grew up in the 60s and 70s during the height of the civil rights movement. And so for me, lawyers were the ones that changed the world. By the time I became a lawyer in 1982, I know that's a long time for some of you all think that's the dark ages, but in 1982, a lot of the progress that had already happened at that point. And so when I came out of law school, I ended up going to a firm in Atlanta and doing public finance work. So I helped cities in finance, city infrastructure. I did school financing. I did higher ed financing. So that was my career as a transactional lawyer. When I had the opportunity to go work in the Obama administration, that's when I became exposed to what I could do policy-wise in the criminal justice space. So I was never a litigator. I was never a criminal defense lawyer. I was never a prosecutor. I came at it from the policy side, and I'm grateful for that opportunity, because I tell people all the time that the hardest decision I ever made, but the best decision I ever made, was to leave the law firm and step out on faith and do something totally different. And when I left the law firm, I went to work for somebody 10 years younger than me and to be somebody's deputy. And I like to say that because sometimes you need to take a step back in order to move forward. And so I took a step back and learned what the Department of Justice does, and that was when I became aware of the Office of Justice Programs and the grant programs and how they worked with cities and counties and nonprofits and tribal communities to figure out how do we make life better. And the good thing about my time in the Obama administration is they came up with a philosophy of really working across the administration. So I developed partnerships and relationships with the Department of Education, Housing and Urban Development, and these are relationships and partnerships that still are here with me at John Jay and help advance our work.
Thank you for that. And so you mentioned your upbringing in Amityville, Long Island. It's funny because I live like on the border of Queens and Long Island. I'm like Floral Park. So if I take a 5-minute walk, then I'm in Long Island.
Right.
And so I wanted to ask, how has your personal background and upbringing shaped your journey and career in the field of I guess policy and then law itself?
So Amityville back then, I don't know if it's bigger. It's probably not. It was less than 10,000 people when I grew up. Grew up with the same kids from kindergarten through high school. And the funny is, I go back for all my reunions. We still call the kids that came in the 9th grade, because that was when Catholic school ended, so a lot of them came in 9th grade. We still call them the new kids, 50 years later. But so for me, my parents grew up in the segregated South, North Carolina, and wound up in New York getting higher ed degrees, because back then, they would rather send black students to get their graduate degrees out of state rather than allow them to go to the schools in North Carolina.
And we're talking about like down south, that's what they would rather
North Carolina.
do.
The state of North Carolina, rather than allow them in their schools for graduate programs. So my mother has a master's from NYU, and my father got a master's from Columbia in public health. So they wound up settling up here. But they raised me with a couple of fundamental understandings. One is that education transforms lives, and that education is really important. My mother was a teacher. Actually, I was the failure of the family, the only one who wasn't in teaching or education until I got this job. And the funny thing is, my niece said to me, she goes, Grandma's proud of you now, because you're finally
It's funny,
in the
for me, it's
family
kind of like
business.
the opposite. So like we had 4 career paths in my family. It was doctor, lawyer, engineer, black sheep.
Oh.
But luckily now,
Yeah.
with the podcast, anytime I tell my mom, you can just share the video out with all your friends and everything.
Right.
Just send it to them on WhatsApp. Look, it's my son.
That's so cute. So for me, that's education meant, and I also grew up with this sense of understanding that I was fortunate and I had a responsibility to give back and do something. So my career choice, I wanted to be a lawyer, but I didn't want to be a litigator. And so doing the public finance work helped me work in neighborhoods and transform communities. And people might think, how did you go from being a public finance lawyer to a college president, and how does that experience help you? Well, getting in and understanding what community needs are and how to transform communities. And so when I drive through Atlanta now and I see neighborhoods that used to be really depressed and now thriving, and I go, I had a hand in doing that work. So growing up, those were the kinds of things that I knew about. My twin brother's a pediatrician, so he worked in an inner city.
You said twin brother, fraternal or?
We have to be fraternal.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I know. I hate saying that, but yeah, yeah. And so we all grew up wanting to do things, and like I said, everybody in my family, but me and my brother, teaches at Morehouse Medical School now. So education's always been important to me, and so that influenced what I did. And for me, it's a coming back to New York in this role is like coming home and making a full circle with my life. And I spent 8 years on the Board of Trustees at UNC Chapel Hill.
Okay.
So that was my, and I did a lot of university financing. So that's how I began to understand how universities function and operate. When I got to DOJ, somebody taught me something important. They said, unless you understand budget, budget is policy. So if you really want to really understand how to have an impact, you've got to understand budgets in order to figure out how you can make the impact and do the work you want to do. So that's all of my life has come together in this job here at John Jay.
Thank you for that. And as president of John Jay, what are your key priorities and goals for the institution?
Yeah, so several. When I took the job, I was so focused on how John Jay was the place where people came to deal with really difficult issues. And that's how I got to know John Jay, coming to different programs they had. That's where I learned that to rethink how I think about young adults who are in our criminal justice system and understanding brain development. And there are all these things that programming that came out of John Jay, so that's what lured me to there, to be able to continue that work. But when I got there, I found out our graduation rates were not where I expected them to be. The 4-year graduation rate was less than 25%.
Really?
And now it's 41.5% since 2017. And that's not my work, that's the work of the team and the commitment of the institution. So my focus when I came in was focusing on how to continue the great work we've been doing in helping communities address these systemic racial issues. But then I got focused also on our graduation rates and supporting student success. So my number one priority, no hesitation, is student success. And what I like is that 6 years later, the mantra at the school is everybody's talking about student success. From our custodians to the provost to our faculty, everybody is committed to the success of our students. So that is my number one goal, is to figure out how to sustain that work, which requires money. And so my commitment is I don't think I can leave this institution until I've left it on solid financial footing to make sure that work that we're doing to support our students is institutionalized. And part of that work is also supporting our faculty, because we don't have students without faculty. So that's my number one priority. Second to that, close second, is continuing to use John Jay as a platform to advance moving issues forward in a collaborative way. So our former Secretary of State, Rosanna Rosado, who's now head of DCJS, she always said that John Jay is like the United Nations of criminal justice issues, because we can bring people together to talk about really complicated issues from all different perspectives and really bring them together. So my goal now is it's a long story that I don't think we have time for, but in the post-George Floyd era, I led a series of conversations in partnership with the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives to figure out, what does public safety look like and what's the role of law enforcement in that. So as the president of a college that was started and founded as a police college, I felt like during that time of upheaval, it was important to try to figure out how to lead us through that work. So we created this initiative called the Future of Public Safety, and we're really working deliberately with our partners across the country to bring people together, talking about how do we have community-led work to increase safe communities where everybody has an opportunity to thrive. So it's a focus on what does the community want, and that's something I learned when I was at DOJ, is to listen to the people that we are trying to support. And listen to what, have them as an integral partner. So just 3 weeks ago, we had our first post-COVID summit that was called Safe and Just Communities, and it was fabulous, bringing people from all across the country to think about how do we continue to advance this work with the community voice centered in it. So that was more than you asked for.
No, but I'm loving every moment of it. In my head, I'm just like, oh my God, all these mental notes I got to take down, but I love it.
Well, the only thing you get to just listen to it again later.
That's the best part. But the one thing I will say is from what you were saying, so John Jay's 4-year graduation rate before was like 25%, and now it's roughly 41%.
41.5.
That's a crazy jump in just like a handful of years. What would you say is the number one biggest, I guess, factor that contributed to that?
So there wasn't one factor. And I learned from my colleagues at the other colleges. So, and there was already work happening at John Jay. So I want to make sure that people understand that this is not my work. It's the work of the faculty and academic affairs and student affairs, everybody in making this happen. What I did was make everybody focus on it and make it a collective effort and much more intentionality around it. So we our former undergraduate dean of student affairs and associate provost, who's now dean of the Macaulay Honors College, Dara Byrne, she'd done all this data and research on where we needed to have interventions and things, and what she needed was the money to do it.
Right.
So I always tell people I had the easy job. Dara had done the hard work of identifying where the interventions were, and I just had to find the funding for it. And because we have success, the money continues to come. Anybody watching this, we still need a lot more. This work cost us, and none of it is coming from tax levy money. This is all funded with external funding, and it costs us $5 million a year to support these programs. So anybody listening, we're here.
So you guys know that
if Mackenzie Scott is listening, I would love a Mackenzie Scott grant.
There you go. So if you guys are listening, anyone with a lot of money, please go to John Jay, donate.
Seriously, we are doing fabulous work. So what we did was focused on the front end of the equation and the back end of the equation. So we focus on incoming freshmen.
Okay.
And we also do, and so we've got a program that we call LEAP. So we knew from the data, the SEEK program and the ACE program, that those students with a lot of wraparound support did better than other students. So, and the Apple Corps students did really well as well. So what we decided to do was try to figure out how to fund an academic cohort program for all of our freshmen who weren't in those programs. So we raised the money to do that. So the students don't know they're in LEAP because they don't use that terminology, but I asked them, I said, are you in a freshman seminar? Do you have a peer advisor?
Then that means you're in LEAP. Got it.
And so everybody has an academic cohort experience coming in, and we know that that's going to help support their success. And thankfully, we launched it right before COVID. So that enabled us to keep our success through COVID because we'd already put the infrastructure in place to be able to have these advisors and people focused on their success. The other thing we did was we knew that students with 90 credits or more, without this intervention we designed called CUSP, Completion for Upper Division Students Program, only 54% of them were graduating. So we did this research with DataKind, which was MasterCard funded, to look at our data and really do a deep dive into it to figure out what was keeping some people who had 90 credits from graduating.
I see.
And so we looked at it and we noticed that two students might have the exact same GPA. Let's say they both have a 2.5, but one started with a 3.0 and moved down to a 2.5. One was steady, or one came up to. So we knew that something different was happening, and so this algorithm allowed us to really dig deeper and look at what students need to get across that finish line. So with this support, we got from projected only 54% to the high 80s a percent of those students who are now graduating because of that focused look at what they need, whether it's academics, advising to help them make sure they've got the right credits in the right places to graduate, whether they needed some financial support or a sense of community. And so we know these things work. So now our focus is on transfer students in the middle. We have this wonderful CUNY Justice Academy, which any students majoring from each of the community colleges, we have an articulation agreement with certain majors. They know from when they come in to those programs that they will be John Jay students. So those students are really successful in graduating, and I have to say that John Jay has the best transfer graduation rate, not just in CUNY, but in New York State. And Columbia did that research. That's not me saying that. But we know that we need more intense focus, again, on our transfer students because 3 out of 5 of our students are transfer students. And so those not in the CUNY Justice Academy, we're trying, again, to create this cohort experience around them. So we've raised money to start some initiatives focused on them. Again, we need all the financial resources we can get to support this work. So that's what happened. It's not just, there wasn't one thing. It was really a focused intentionality and looking across the spectrum of what the student needs are.
Thank you for that. And, from what you were saying, my interpretation is, so you essentially found out where the touch points were, the intervention points needed, and then supported that infrastructure, which is external funding, to give the students what they needed.
That's exactly.
Got you.
I love your articulation. I think I'm going to borrow that.
No worries. Hey, listen, if you borrow it, I'm all game.
And I'll give you attribution.
Oh, listen, as a teacher, my favorite saying was, we love to borrow indefinitely.
Exactly. I like that too.
So I want to switch gears and ask, how has your experience at the DOJ and as the Assistant Attorney General shaped your views as the John Jay president and like the initiatives you've done and the approach you've taken?
Yeah. So the DOJ experience, I would say, expanded my world and gave me exposure to a world that I never would have seen if I just continued to keep my head down practicing law. And so I got a chance to see what communities really need and with and how to in order to thrive, and a renewed passion to be part of that change and part of that work, which was what I went to school to do, but just didn't have the inroads to do it. So the DOJ experience gave me the opportunity to have relationships that helped me do this work. So, for example, the now Chancellor at SUNY, John King, we worked together before he was the Secretary of Education. When he first came in, he was Deputy Secretary, and we worked on President Obama's My Brother's Keeper initiative, which is near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure we'll talk about it at some point in this conversation. But it was because of those relationships and the deep dive we did into communities that's enabling me to understand how to support the success of our students by listening to what they say they need. Then on the other side, this work has really helped on the justice side, which is key to John Jay's identity and being able to be leaders in moving this work. And I say leaders plural because it's not John Jay, it's all of our collective partners. And so, for example, Nick Turner, who runs the Vera Institute, and Courtney Bryan, who runs the Center for Justice Innovation, the three of us met when I was at DOJ, and now we have this understanding that if Nick or Courtney ever ask me to do anything, my answer is yes. And then I find out what it is they need. And they do the same. So we were able to work with the mayor on his transition of his public safety plan. I had 3 weeks to do it. And I called over Thanksgiving. We had to deliver it right before Thanksgiving. So I called Courtney and Nick, and I said, I need you. This is what we're doing. I need you to help lead this work. And what's important is the trust we have with each other, and nobody's ego is wrapped up in it. It's the work we're committed to, and not who gets credit for it. And so working with the administration helped me develop relationships that are still really critical to the work we do at John Jay every day. When I asked the former head of the DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, if he would come speak to our students, the answer was yes. All he needed was a plane ticket. These people, the former Attorney General, he's come to speak at our college, Eric Holder, a number of times. People come because of the relationship, and so that's been beneficial for our students.
And you mentioned something very important that me, myself, I've started to embody in the recent years, which is, if you want to go fast, go at it alone. But if you want to go far, go at it together. Because when you don't have that ego wrapped up and then you're actually focused on the work itself, then it doesn't become a battle of, okay, I want to get credit for this, or I want to do this instead of you. It's more of, all right, let's all put our heads together, play on
Right.
each other's strengths instead of playing on each
Right.
other's weaknesses.
And you need those ideas because I love to be surrounded by people that challenge me because I know how I think. And it's not sufficient because I need people to see around corners and think about things I'm not thinking about. And that's the beauty of having, strong people around you who are comfortable speaking their mind. And my ego, again, is secure enough that I want people to challenge me and say, no, that's wrong. I'm like, okay, why? And then we get to a better place when we've thought about all the things and, kick the tires and really think about the hard things. And where I get the most joy, for example, there's a lot of discussion around bail reform.
Okay.
And so what we did is we have the Data Collaborative for Justice, which had done a lot of research on that area. So we just pulled together Erica Bond, not me. Erica Bond pulled together in partnership with Mike Rampell, who runs the Data Collaborative for Justice, a convening around bail. And we brought people together who were vehemently opposed to each other, had them on panels together, and the joy came when the panel was over, seeing them in a corner talking and working together and figuring out how to deal with this. And that's what we get to do at John Jay. And again, it's relationship driven.
Thank you for that. And, I want to shift gears and talk about the My Brother's Keeper initiative real quick, just because you mentioned that, and I was like, perfect segue into it. And, I feel bad being New York City Men Teach not talking about the MBK initiative because we also work closely with them. And funny enough, one of my colleagues actually works with the Talk program, which is an MBK affiliated program. But I want to ask you, so how did the creation of MBK happen?
The origins? So, President Obama's first term, there were a lot of shootings in Chicago. Continues to be a challenge. And he challenged the then Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, and A.G. Holder to go to Chicago and try to figure out how do we address this issue at the root. And what came out of that was something called the Forum on Youth Violence Prevention, which was a partnership between the Department of Education, Health and Human Services, and the Department of Justice.
And just to clarify, this is all on the federal level, correct?
Correct. But to partner at the local level in addressing these issues. And that's why I wanted to be at the Office of Justice Programs, because that's where the work happens. That's where the Department of Justice partners with local communities to help support that local work. So when I got to OJP, the Office of Justice Programs, as the Assistant Attorney General, the Trayvon Martin situation happened. His murder happened. That was not at the hands of law enforcement. It was a private individual, vigilante in my view. But because of that, and because of President Obama's own interaction with a group in Chicago called Becoming a Man, BAM, he said he had a vision of wanting to create something different, more cohesive and more coherent and engaging, not just governments but also nonprofits, and that was the origin of My Brother's Keeper. So when he signed that order in 2014, I still remember that cold February day. It was bitterly cold. We were outside waiting to go into the White House, and we were okay because we were excited about the work. Little did I understand that in 90 days we had to deliver a report to the president with what it looked like and how we were going to operationalize that work. And that became our blueprint, My Brother's Keeper, and there are 6 milestones. And so everything from before birth through careers are the milestones. And there's a milestone 6 is the criminal justice milestone. Milestone 4 is the college milestone. So I've been part of MBK work from its origins, and I'm now on the MBK advisory board at the Obama Foundation. So this work is important to me. And so one of the things that I have committed to do, 2 things for President Obama. One is milestone 4, and I'm leading the work about college success. So New York State is the model for us about investing in K through 12 and the success of our men of color. And for those of you who don't know what MBK is, it's changing the narrative around our views of men and boys of color and ensuring their success and their life outcomes. And so, because we all need it. I mean, because if their success is our success as a country, as a community, everything. So, MBK New York, fabulous work. The handoff to colleges and the college graduation needs some more work. And so I'm leading the effort for MBK on the college handoff. And so what I'm working in partnership with the Borough of Manhattan Community College and MBK New York to figure out how do we improve that pipeline and that success. And BMCC, that's what we affectionately call the Borough of Manhattan Community College, we're developing a program that we're going to launch this summer with our young men of color coming into our colleges as incoming freshmen, to give them an acceleration program to help them build a sense of community to our colleges and understand what college is like, so they'll take a real course, get real credit. We're trying to figure out what the fun activities will be. But anybody listening, again, encourage all of the young men who've been accepted at BMCC and John Jay to enter this program. We're going to give a $1,000 stipend. We're going to give a Metro card and pay for the books. So that's what I'm excited about how to really ensure the success of MBK into the college years. On the other end, we have an agreement with the Obama Foundation to lead their Mayor's Pledge, which this is the second Mayor's Pledge focused on community safety from a community perspective. So Erica Bond, who's our Vice President for Justice Initiatives at John Jay, is leading that work. And so we launched that in April, and so we're working with cities across the country to help them rethink and reframe and support their success in a community-based approach to community safety.
And when you're talking about the BMCC partnership, that accelerated program is for an accelerated bachelor's?
No. That's an accelerated to get you ready to come into college. It's for freshmen.
I got it. So it's geared towards freshmen then.
Yeah, this is just entering freshmen right now and helping them get comfortable with that shift from, because again, My Brother's Keeper in New York is doing a fabulous job getting them through high school, and now we want to make sure they're successful in college, so we're going to start with them the summer before they enter as freshmen.
Oh, that's great, actually. Okay. And it was funny because while you're talking about the MBK initiative and how it was a cold day right before you enter the White House, I don't know what it is with educational programs and the cold, because for New York City Men Teach, when we got New York City Men Teach a Day, that same day the proclamation was made, blizzard or something like that. So they had to, one of my colleagues had to trek through the snow with the proclamation. So maybe, they're just the weather is just trying to deter us, but we're just like,
no, I think
anyway.
It's showing who's really committed to the work, because we show up, it doesn't matter.
And, with the MBK initiative, since you said that, you hold it near and dear to your heart, and the two pillars, or...
Well, there are 6 pillars, but, milestones.
Okay.
And I'm focused on 4, which is college to college attainment, and 6, which is providing a second chance for those who've been caught up in our criminal justice system.
Got it. And then I'm assuming the other advisory members on the board...
And reducing violence.
Okay. And then I'm assuming the other advisory members on the board help with the other 4...
They're advisory board members. I'm more than an advisory board member because no, they don't do that. We communities do the other work.
Gotcha.
And so that's why what New York State is doing with MBK New York, that's the model of what MBK is really like, and is getting community invested in working on this with MBK. So the advisory board is the advisory board, but because I also have a day job that is connected to this work, that I'm invested in a different way.
Ah, okay, I see. And then speaking about, the day job, how do you envision the role of John Jay College in addressing...
Less at the day job.
Right? Because I'm always like, okay.
If only it were just a day job.
I feel you. Sometimes it'll be the nights and the weekends.
Not sometimes. It's all the time. But go ahead.
How do you envision the role of John Jay in addressing current challenges and shaping the future of criminal justice, education, and research?
Okay. So... I'm going to answer the education piece first, since that's our primary mission as an educational institution. And that is, again, ensuring the success of our students and leading in showing, everybody always talks about the great work that Georgia State has done, which is phenomenal, increasing the graduation rates of students of color. Freeman Rabowski has done a fabulous job at University of Maryland, Baltimore campus. I want CUNY to be one of those leaders, and because of who we serve, the majority of our students are of color. And I want us to be one of those national models of best practice in ensuring the success of our students of color, not because, again, we just want to wave our flag, but because I want to be able to show people this is how you do it, and then have them take it up and actually do it, because again, we all succeed if the models are taken up and people learn this is how you support the success of our students of color who are our future.
Right. And
so on the criminal justice side, again, that's the future of public safety work
Right.
that's being led by Erica Bond, and again, in partnership with all the folks at Crescent. So we're consulting with Aspen Institute's criminal justice reform work. We're consulting with the National League of Cities and their reimagining public safety work, and so people see us as good partners in this work, and that's what it's going to take to show people how you transform this work. It's hard work. We know what should be done. It's the commitment to doing it. And after the summit we had just 3 weeks ago, I have all the confidence in the world that with all of our partners, we are already making change, and we just need to continue to solidify it and show people across the country how to do it.
And you've been talking about a lot of the initiatives and projects you guys have been working on. But apart from those, are there any other recent initiatives or projects that you're particularly excited about at John Jay?
The summer program for MBK, really excited about that, and our future public safety work. So those are the two big drivers for me, those two things. And I think they really bring all of the work together for our students, because our students are committed to being public servants, regardless of their profession. They go into all kinds of professions. We have a strong pipeline to law enforcement, which is huge, because we're putting students in law enforcement who have our philosophy about life and partnering with communities and the importance of those relationships, and they're part of the communities. And we have young people going into medicine and the sciences and doing research. And we've got a professor, Lizette Delgado Cruzado, who's doing breast cancer research in minority communities, and it's different. And so all of our students go out into the world with this focus about, how do I do this through an equity lens, through a justice lens? And so that's where the work all comes together for me.
Thank you for that. And I want to take a step back and actually focus on you as a person. And so could you discuss your because we're talking about, the college and the assistant attorney general, but who is Karol Mason in the sense of, could you discuss I was like, who is Karol Mason, and then I just read straight from the question. I should have phrased that a little bit better, but could you discuss your educational journey and the role education has played in your personal and professional development?
So I grew up in Amityville, just across the bridge here, and in a small little town. There were 211 people in my graduating class, so I had a real small town experience. And I went to UNC Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I loved it because I didn't know a single soul.
Right.
I wanted a place where I didn't know anybody. And I got interested in Chapel Hill because I'd never been.
Okay.
I got interested in Chapel Hill because my high school English teacher, Mr. Pillar,
Oh.
used to bring his alumni magazines in, and I, for some strange reason, got interested in Carolina. It wasn't because of Carolina basketball. I didn't know Carolina basketball until I got there.
Right.
But I am a big fan. So Carolina gave me the opportunity to really stretch and grow in an environment where I didn't know anybody and nobody knew me, and to really grow and develop. And to me, that's what college is about, is helping you grow and helping you develop and figure out who you are and who you want to become. And I ended up at the University of Michigan Law School because I loved being in college in a college town where everything revolved around college.
Right.
And I wasn't sure that I was strong enough to resist the temptations if I'd gone to school in Boston or New York City. So I went to Ann Arbor, where there's nothing there but the university.
Right.
Sorry, the town of Ann Arbor, if you think that there are other things there, but it's everything
That's in
revolves
Eastern
around
Michigan, right?
It's in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Okay, good. For a sec, my geography is always so bad when it comes to America.
Yeah,
just
it's a suburb. It's outside of Detroit.
Oh, okay, got you.
Yeah. And, people from Michigan do this and show you where it is on the hand. I'm not from Michigan, so I don't know where to show you it is on the hand. And going to Michigan Law School was also an eye-opening experience because, well, let me back up. I ended up going south to college because my mother felt it was really important for us to understand what it's like to be in the South, because she grew up in the segregated South, and she just thought that our experience in Amityville, which was very integrated, very mixed and supportive, she wanted me to have a different experience. So that's how I wound up in the South. She wanted me to go to black school. The compromise was to go south. My twin brother went to Morehouse.
Okay.
So I'm an honorary Morehouse man. And so for me in the South was understanding my first taste of racial segregation issues.
Okay.
Because I remember going to the football games and having to run between my groups of friends because the black students pretty much hung together, and the other, which was with 211 people in your graduating class, everybody hung with each other because you just had
like
to.
a smaller vibe,
So it was an interesting experience for me. When I got to Michigan, what was different is I'd never been around wealth. Because where I grew up, nobody cared what your parents did for a living. Everybody lived the same way. And that was my exposure to the uber wealthy people. And I thought, like, the heir to the Parker
Like
Games
really,
fortune.
really old money, essentially.
Yeah, heir to the Ford body company, And I'm like, okay, but, they're just like us. I mean, you know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, they got to get through life too, but it was my first exposure to people like that, so it was interesting. And when I got to Michigan Law School, again, I thought I was going to go into some sort of civil rights public service work, but didn't know. I had not met lawyers before I went to law school. I knew one lawyer in town, Lawyer Cobb, in Amityville. That was it. So I also learned that there were these other ways to practice law, and so when I got to Michigan, that's when I understood large law firms and had that opportunity. And so I'm of the generation where I was told that if you have the opportunity, you have to take it to open the doors for other people. And so I ended up practicing law at Alston Bird, a large law firm, because I had the opportunity and to open doors. So for me, to see the young people coming behind me, I was the first black woman to make partner at the firm and at any major firm in Atlanta, period. I was the first black woman to get on a management committee at a major law firm in the country, and the first to chair a management committee. And I'm old if you're adding that up. And so I was of the generation where you had to open those doors, and I'm loving seeing all the folks behind, ruling and running things. I love to tease I have a lot of little sisters, and I love seeing them lead things. So I'm going to give a shout out to Lisa Hamilton, who runs the Annie E. Casey Foundation. I told her that now she vouches for me when I'm going out philanthropy.
Right.
And people, they go, oh, Lisa Hamilton? I said, yes, actually, she's my little sister and her daughter's godmother. It opens doors for me. And so that's, being able to see the people who've come behind me really thrive and have these leadership roles, that's success to me. That we've got all these people doing all of these wonderful jobs now.
Man, like my heartstrings are being tugged right now because like I love it when I hear stuff like that too, because I'm in a similar way where it's just like I feel like in America we have a very crabs in a barrel mentality, but in reality, why do you got to pull up the ladder after you've gone up? You should be extending it. But going along with that same topic, what advice would you have for young professionals, being the trailblazer you are, young professionals just entering this space and trying to make a name for themselves and trying to like find their footing in this world?
Yeah, I would say don't focus on making a name for yourself. Focus on the work. And the world is different now. It's a harder world than I grew up in, because you've got all these competing pressures and access to information and things that I didn't have. The school now has for me a social media footprint, but I don't have one.
Right.
And so the world's a lot different now for you all, but in many ways that opens up more opportunities, because there are a lot more career paths for people. So my advice would be a couple of things. Focus on doing a good job wherever you are. If you're a student in school, focus on doing a good job in school and focusing on your schoolwork. If in your career, focus on the job you have and not always be focused on the job you want to get next, because and those relationships matter. When your peers around you, develop strong, long-lasting relationships, because that's what's going to support and sustain you through life. And as you move through life, it's wonderful to know people who knew you as just who you are. And so my best friend is Valerie Jarrett, who happened to have been the advisor to President Obama and Michelle Obama. But to me, she's Valerie, and to her, I'm Karol. And to this, it's 44 years later, we met in law school, and we knew each other back when, and so we're not caught up in each other's hype. We're just people. And so having those people around you who will ground you and keep you remembering who you are and why you do what you do is important. And then I'd say that listening is really key, and being open to hearing different things and hearing disagreement, and learning from people who think differently than you do. I had a law school professor who taught me that when I clerked for a federal judge after I graduated from law school. She said, don't clerk for a judge who thinks like you. Go clerk for a Republican judge.
Right.
Because you want to learn how other people think. And that was the best lesson. So I clerked for a Republican judge who was really helpful to me in shaping. And I always laugh because when Judge Grady, when we interviewed the clerks coming behind, I said, I don't know about this one, this next one coming, because she's so conservative. He said, well, that might make me liberal. And I was like, well, then hire her.
Right.
But he again was somebody who taught me that he hired liberal clerks intentionally to give him a different perspective on things and to challenge him. And so that's why I think it's important to really get out of your comfort zone and learn to be uncomfortable with being uncomfortable, and learning to stay in conversation with people who think differently about you than you do. Because if we all, that's what's wrong with America right now, is we're all in our corners. We got to figure out, and that's the beauty of John Jay, is we can get people in the same space together, but you need a commitment to staying in conversation with people who don't think like you do. And I'll give one other example. One of my former law partners, we were summer associates together, and we're really close friends. And then we got to a point in our careers where it was just difficult for me to be around Mike because his views were so different and so challenging, and it just made me angry. Right. He stuck with me.
Gotcha.
And he was like, no, I'm not letting this relationship go. Now we agree on more than we thought we would, which is a little frightening. I was like, okay, you move to my way, Mike. And he's like, no, you move to my way. But it's staying in conversation with people who think differently. That's really important, I think, for your long-term development and for the long-term betterment of the work we all want to do.
And you know, it's interesting, like throughout the whole conversation, I'm realizing the one big theme, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the one big theme of your leadership is humility. You keep mentioning time and time again, you surround yourself with people who think different than you. You want people to disagree with you. You want that civil discourse. And when I think about that, I'm just curious, and I want to ask, where do you think that like strong commitment to humility came from?
So I'm going to use it. I'm not sure how people define humility. And so I'm not sure how you're using it, but I want to tell you something that I learned when I was doing some transition work for the Biden administration. One of the tests we had in terms of high leadership jobs, one of the things they wanted to suss out was something called intellectual humility. And so I'm hearing that question that way. And what that means is it's the ability, what's your ability to take in new information and change your view based on that new information. So for me, that's how I hear the word humility, not in terms of, this false sense of, oh, I'm not worthy or whatever. No, to me, humility is, again, having the ability, the security to listen to other people and change your mind about things. And so I think where that comes from is just the way I was raised. My parents were, I think for me, the theme is the sense of commitment to doing what I can to make a difference in the world.
Thank you for that. Yeah, just because like for me, I'm in a similar way where like I want to be in a room with people who are smarter than me, people who have different life experiences, because I feel like nowadays everyone wants to be in a room where people just agree with you. When you have just nonstop homogenous opinions, you have then confirmation bias. You're always going to think you're right. And there's been times where I have been in those situations, then I look back and I'm like, why didn't anyone tell me that was not the way to do it?
Right. I always think about the emperor with no clothes. You want somebody to tell you, don't just. And I call it the echo chamber because I'm around a lot of people who share our commitment, our values and views. Sometimes it's important to get out of that echo chamber because there is a different perspective out there. There are different views, and nobody's better than the other. It's just, what I love is thinking about is we all ultimately have the same goal. So when we had these series of curated conversations around the future of public safety, I brought people with all different perspectives, walks of life, and I knew that if we asked the right question, which was, what does safe community look like to you, we found 9 points of consensus. And that's important, to focus on what the goal is, and that we may not all agree about how do you get there, but if you can hone in on what the goal is, that's where the magic happens, in thinking about how do you get there and working together, because you stay focused on the goal, not on being right or my way.
Right, it's kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel. It's like you'll figure out the journey along the way, but as long as you have that central goal, no matter what the perspectives are, you'll work towards getting that. And, we have about 10-ish minutes left in our segment, and it's making me a little sad. I was like, damn, I want this conversation to be longer. But I want to ask you, looking ahead, what are your aspirations for John Jay College? What impact do you hope to make during your tenure as president?
So, again, it's to institutionalize the support for the success of our students. That is my number one goal. and that means raising the financial resources to make sure that this work can continue in perpetuity, well beyond me. That's what drives me, is to figure out how do we solidify this work so it's not dependent on who sits in my chair, to make sure that our students get the education that they deserve and that we committed to give them when they came to John Jay. Secondly, my goal is to really have a long-term impact in addressing systemic disparities and getting communities focused on how do we do this in a framework that deals with the systemic issues, and making sure that, again, that work is not dependent on who the mayor is, who the police chief is, and making sure the communities understand their power, their voice, so that we can, again, institutionalize that kind of work as well, so that we create communities where everybody has a chance to fulfill their dreams. And that's not just lip service, that's a real commitment that I want to make sure that people have. And, I'm not naive enough to think that that's going to happen under my tenure. But I want to do is create this next, make sure that we've equipped the generation coming behind me. So that's why Erica Bond is leading this work. I'm not leading the work. Erica is. She's 20 years my junior. She's going to be here longer than me. And what drives me is, last year, or was it the year before, it was the 50th anniversary of Marvin Gaye's song, What's Going On?
Right.
And the video about it, and they did a special on it in one of the programs. And I looked at the videos and I was like, that looks like it looks today.
Right.
And I don't want you 50 years from now being asked, why did they get it wrong? And so we got, so now it's trying to figure out, how do we make sure that 50 years from now, it no longer looks like that video,
right,
and that it's sustained progress. You're always going to have challenges, but we ought to have some sustained progress, and that to me is what drives me.
And going with the challenges part, the second to last question, I'm glad that there's like these key words. I'm like, oh, great segue. But it's, in your opinion, what are some of the key challenges in criminal justice reform, and how do you believe that academia, policy, and practice can work together to address them effectively?
So, and I use the word justice reform and not just criminal justice, because and that's, again, John Jay is focused on justice issues writ large. I think that the key thing is making sure that we make the investments where the investments need to be made. Because if we invest in education, we invest in mental health, we invest in job creation, we invest in safe and secure housing, then people have an opportunity to live and thrive, and that reduces the number of people who come in contact with our criminal justice system. Because right now the system is structured as the catch-all for everything, and we need to restore that social safety network. And I know that when I talked to some of our funders about this work, they said, sounds like you're running an anti-poverty program. And I said, we tried that. And I said, yeah, we tried it in the 70s and 80s, but we didn't succeed because it wasn't sustained, and we didn't focus on I think, the core issues. And, you're in education. That education transforms lives. We need to invest in it and make sure that everybody's got a bare minimum quality education that is above the bare minimum we're delivering right now. People who have more resources are going to have more opportunities, but you ought to have the reason we have a public education system is to ensure that we all have it. And I am a proud product of only public institutions. I've never attended a private college in my life.
Twins.
And I went through K through 12 and then, Chapel Hill in Michigan. And I think public education is important. So that's one thing, investing in that, investing in mental health, healthcare period, not just mental health, healthcare period, job creation, safe and secure housing. If you do all these things so that people have an opportunity to really live the lives they want to, then we don't have some of these other issues. Now, there are people who disagree with that, and that's fine. I still think that we don't lose by making those investments. We definitely lose if we don't make those investments. And I also think that, there are people who are going to get caught up in our criminal justice system for different reasons. And the question is, how do we focus on their success? Because we do know that just putting people in jail does not create safe communities. It disrupts communities. And so we ought to be thinking about putting people in jail as a last alternative for those who need to be, for the safety of themselves and the community, to be separated, but not permanently, except in isolated cases. and figure out how do we equip them to be successful,
Right.
and what is it that caused them to come into the system so that we can make sure that we ensure their success afterwards. And one of the things I learned, again, from hearing from people who are directly impacted, children who have parents who are incarcerated need a relationship with their parents.
Right.
And the parents need a relationship with them, and they need a connection to their community. That's how you give people opportunities to thrive and make sure that everybody thrives. So these are just the kinds of investments and things that I think are important, and that that we at John Jay can help communities have these kinds of conversations and think about those kinds of investments and how to do it in partnership across communities.
And thank you for that wonderful answer, because right now we got the final question, which is my favorite. I always ask because it's like my personal fan favorite, or not fan favorite, my favorite. But if you could go back in time and do anything differently, whether it's professionally or personally, would you or would you not?
No, because I think even the bad things that happen for a reason and shape who I am. No, I had to go through all the things I went through to be able to be here today. And I'm fortunate that I don't, there's some things I don't want anybody to know about. But I wouldn't change them, because I wouldn't be who I am today without some of those experiences. Now, what I do tell people all the time is I learn from other people's experiences too.
Live vicariously through their experiences.
Right. So I see people making some bad. I was like, okay, tell me what happened there, so I don't have to do that and have that experience, because I'm perfectly fine not having that really, really, really horrible bad experience.
And so, Karol, I want to thank you, like from the bottom of my heart. Like, this was a great episode. The whole time I'm giddy, but I'm also a little nervous. I'm like, damn, I don't know how to operate with this. But what I will say is, before we wrap up, if there's anybody you want to shout out, programs, people, sponsors, etc., you can look to your camera and just shout them out.
I just want to say thank you to my partners at John Jay, because they are phenomenal. I get to do this work with them every day and be their ambassador. And I have to give a shout out to my boss, Chancellor Felix Matos Rodriguez, for trusting me with this job, because I know I'm not always easy. So thank you.
And Karol, again, thank you so much for coming on this episode. This like smoke and smog from the Canada wildfire really screwed up with me, because now I've just been like coughing all morning for some reason.
It's because you look out that window and you can see the smog.
Like, look at that. I mean,
I know you can't miss it from out
but
here.
luckily, we got color correction, so when they see the episode, they'll be like, oh, what a beautiful, nice sky, not knowing what we had to deal with afterwards. But with that being said, guys, that does wrap up episode 5 of Education in Color. Thank you so much for joining us. And Karol, again, thank you so much for coming on to this podcast. We'll see you guys next time for episode 6. Take care.